Well, as you are continuing to introduce yourself in the chat, we appreciate you being here. We want to encourage you throughout the webinar today to add questions that you have, reactions. We want this to be as interactive as it can be, and we appreciate you joining us. So to start, I'll introduce myself and our organization and our panelists, but my name is Devin Vodicka. I'm the co-CEO of Learner-Centered Collaborative, and we are one of your hosts today. We have an incredible panel of distinguished leaders, and joining us here today from UC San Diego, we have Dr. Alan Daly. Hello, Alan. We also have Dave Trautman from the UC San Diego team. Welcome, Dave. And then we have Diana. She is the CEO of High Tech High, Diana Cornejo-Sanchez. Thanks for joining us. And we also have Krista Berntsen from Del Mar Union Elementary School District, the principal of Ocean Air School. Thank you for joining us. And I'll tell you a little bit about Learner-Centered Collaborative, and then we will jump into asking our panelists some questions. But Learner-Centered Collaborative is a national nonprofit, and we are thrilled to be with you here today. We have a bold vision for the future, and that vision is that we hope to see education ecosystems where all learners know who they are, thrive in community, and actively engage in the world as their best selves. And when we think about this concept of an ecosystem is full of life, and it's full of agents that have identities and that have the ability to express their interests in ways that are interdependent with one another. And we believe that it is going to take that sort of connected environment, that sort of connected ecosystem to really bring about a brighter vision for each of us as learners, in which we develop that sense of self, the ability to interact with others, and the ability to engage in the world as our best selves. And as we go through the conversation today, we hope that you'll hold in mind this vision of a possible future where we are interdependent and existing in new forms of interaction so that we can really amplify our strengths and get to that brighter view of what's possible. And in the work that we do, we're fortunate to collaborate with school systems all across the United States. We've partnered with more than 100 school districts and I believe 5 state agencies. And that to me is an indication that there's growing demand and interest in creating and co-designing these new models of teaching and learning that really bring about that expanded view of what's possible for each of us and for communities and for society as a whole. And as I mentioned, we take a network approach on the next slide. And that involves a lot of different elements. Obviously, for us, those close partnerships with school districts and school systems like Del Mar, like High Tech High, and many others is central to the work that we do. But convenings like this webinar are also really important. It brings together community, gives us an opportunity to share what we're doing, what we're learning, and how that might inform broader change in the world. And one of the things that's so exciting about this particular partnership is that relationship that we have with higher education, with 12 systems, and I think that's a great manifestation of this ecosystem view of change. And so from here, just sort of bringing us back to this idea that we believe that a broader view of success is possible for each of us as learners, and we hope that we'll just be embracing that learner mindset throughout the course of this conversation. So with that, I'm going to be asking our panelists some questions. And I'm going to start with Dr. Alan Daly. And it would be great, Dr. Daly, if you could share with our attendees a little bit of the vision that is behind SoCal LiNK and how it came to be.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Devin. Well, I feel really honored and privileged to be here with such an amazing set of panelists and an equally impressive set of folks that have joined us. So thanks a lot for joining us here this afternoon. We feel really happy that you're all here and we get to share in community together. So Devin, thanks for the question. So today we're focused on this idea around SoCal LiNK, and SoCal LiNK is actually quite an impressive array of a variety of different organizations, all that are really focused on this idea about supporting learner-centered education. So we have a collection of folks that includes districts and higher ed and foundations and county offices of education, a variety of others. The idea is, how do we really think deeply around regional ecosystems? How do we leverage and catalyze those to actually make fundamental differences for the lived experiences of both the youth and the adults that are working and learning within those systems? And to do that kind of important work, we have come together in partnership. And Devin and I have a long, long history. I won't relate all the years that we've been together, but I've been fortunate enough to have a good relationship, a long relationship with Devin since way back in the day when we were both in our early 20s. That's not really true, but I really want it to be true. And
Feels about right, Alan.
yeah,
That
yeah,
feels about right.
yeah. I can't tell if the early 20s is just our IQs or like age. It's up to debate, I think, at this point. Um, but we, in partnership with some others, came together because we thought, wow, wouldn't it be awesome to bring folks together? And the intersection bit here is around, how do we advance these learner-centered education practices, which is so central to all of us you're going to hear from in our work, with this idea of what some of the core competencies that we can bring as a university partner, which is to generate evidence-based solutions. And how do we really come together and do that and recognize that knowledge and wisdom and collective power is really gained through all of us coming together and working together? And so we on the UCSD time, and we'd be on UCSD team, would be remiss unless we mentioned our really wonderful colleague, Dr. Mimi Lockton, who is just joining as a participant today, not as a voice. She, I don't know, unwisely left that to Dave and I. So in this vision, we want to come together. We want to really focus on what the knowledge is and wisdom that we bring as a university, but also that resides out into the world of practice in all its corners. And to do that, we take quite a unique approach. And I'm going to turn this over to my good friend and colleague, Dave Trautman, to talk a little bit about our unique approach and how we work through this. Dave?
Awesome. Thank you, Alan. Yeah. So with that introduction, drawing on the strengths of the university, a couple of points to note. One, we're all sort of on the UCSD team researchers, but we're also all former K-12 educators. And so I think that is an important part of this process, is really understanding the needs. And with that, I think the strengths of a research team is not necessarily answering questions, but asking questions. And so we spend a lot of time engaging with folks in the system. And I'm going to talk about sort of 3 layers of research and how that weaves together with these 4 colored dots. So on one layer, we are curating research. So we're trying to identify which resources, information is most relevant and related to the problems of practice that folks are working through. So this could be talking about a social network approach. It could also be one of our sessions, which was pairing folks up with researchers at UCSD to talk about new and emerging research in the areas that they're passionate about. We also seek to elevate, and so this is, again, a lot of listening, and I talk about sort of the in-between time is really important for us between sessions when we're talking to participants, when we're trying to get a sense of what they're doing, what they're working on, and we try and synthesize that and really elevate the local practices that are effective, that people are leaning into. And then, of course, generate, right? Like, our goal is to also be asking questions that we can use to answer, like, what makes an ecosystem robust and resilient? What can we do that actually leads to the types of connections that are going to facilitate transformational change in the region? And so all of this, throughout those sort of 3 layers, we are constantly rigorously examining the needs of the system, and in particular, the folks within that system. We're drawing on the sea of resource and information that's out there and really targeting it to the folks who need it most at that moment in time. We are looking at ways that we can consistently provide evidence-based support and guide the change process, and then also thinking about the health and wellness of the ecosystem as a whole. And Alan now is going to talk a little bit more about, from like a very social network perspective, what that ecosystem looks like.
Great. Thank you, Dave. I appreciate that. I think one of the core things, and this underscores everything you're going to hear today, it's a deep commitment to shifting mindsets about the ways that we think about our work, whether we're thinking about that in a classroom, in a school district, at a county office of ed, across the region, no matter what it might be. And it's a direct shift from this sort of over focus on these formal systems where everyone's in their discrete role doing their own discrete things to something that is much more networked or interconnected. And you can see that on the side to the right hand here as your screen. And so while in the formal system, the all-knowing red eye might be right at the top, that individual might actually be quite marginalized in the informal system. So what we've got to focus on here is the power and foundation of our relationships. And the way that we think about this work is that it is messy until it's magic. And that's really, I think, underscores SoCal LiNK and the kind of work we're doing and bringing people together. So with this idea of messy then magic, I'll turn it back to my friend, Devin.
Yeah, thank you, Alan and Dave. That's a really helpful framing around how this came together. And I think that the power of this networked learning is really resonant with that idea of an ecosystem for the future. And it is messy, and it's beautiful in the messiness, and it's often, one of those experiences where when it comes together, it seems so obvious. But we are also trying to provide structures and systems to help move people through this sort of organic learning experience. And so, Dave, if I can put you on the spot, just have you talk through a little bit. We did a series of convenings this year, and we brought about 10 school systems to each of these convenings. Can you just walk through real quickly what the arc of the year looked like, and what did we do in this network?
For sure. Yeah. So I will start by saying our first ask was that folks committed to all 4 sessions and that they bring a team that represented different entry points in their organization. So somebody who's in a teaching-based position, somebody in a site leadership-based position, and a central office leadership-based position. And again, leaning into the power of collaboration across lines of difference and organizational hierarchies. So we started the year by first doing some surveying of them to get a sense of what are their goals, what do they see as the needs in their organization, and then we spent time in our first session where they came together and thought as a team now, based on those individual responses, what are the goals that we have that are really resonant with all of us that we can commit to around learner-centered education for the rest of the year. And with that, we mapped out some like who else needs to be part of this story? Like what are the other folks that are not in the room that we should be including? In our second session, we came together and started thinking about some of our work around narrative. So how are we telling the story of these goals? We've identified the goals. We're working on sort of integrating key players, but like, what is the story? What are the intended consequences? What are the unintended possible consequences? And how do we craft that into an inclusive narrative that captures everyone's part in that? In our third session, we then drew on what we heard from folks and brought together researchers from across the Department of Education Studies at UCSD to really connect in small groups with practitioners around, hey, here's the stuff we're doing to support multilingual learners. Here's the ways that we're thinking about how organizations as systems facilitate change. Here are the ways that like networks play a role, not just for adults, but for students. Here's how we sort of conceptualize things in the learning sciences. And then from there, we came back together in our final session where folks had the opportunity to not just share what they had done, but share like a very concrete, tangible resource or way that they engaged in the work with each other. So we did some sort of like organizational matchmaking where folks were intentionally paired with other organizations that either had a similar challenge or similar structure or something important to say. And so we did some intentional injection of like, I don't know, motivation into the ecosystem to really make sure that folks are connecting. The folks who need to talk to each other are talking to each other.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Dave. So I'm going to ask some questions of our school and district system leaders now, and I'm going to start with Krista Berntsen, who's principal of an elementary school in Del Mar School District here in San Diego County. And Krista, it'd be helpful just to share a little bit about what drew your team into this work and how does it connect with your broader vision of learner-centered education in Del Mar?
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Devin. Yeah, I think that what drew us to SoCal LiNK was really that opportunity to commit to that network. So I feel like we're so lucky in Del Mar. We have this really beautiful system. We have high quality teaching and learning. We have so many great things happening. And it was also sort of a time of tension because we've been on this pathway of like this commitment to these frameworks, creating a culture of thinking, essential elements of instruction, cognitively guided instruction in mathematics. And then we built this portrait of a learner recently. This is year 2. So then we were thinking, how does that really come to life? Like nothing happens in Del Mar without we commit and we really make that come to life for the student experience. So the tension was around, okay, this is what teaching and learning actually looks like. This is a creating a culture of thinking looks like this, but we had this standards-based report card. We have sort of contextual complexities, high expectations, and what does that look like on a report card, and how are we assessing for, a whole learner outcome? So that was a big question that we had, and I think it was really important for us to draw upon a larger network to kind of learn from what have others been thinking about, what are some barriers that, some challenges, what do we need to be considering more as we kind of take on this new sort of possibility for assessment and reporting.
Mm-hmm. And Del Mar has a very ambitious plan for the future, this Destination 2028 vision. So maybe can you share an example of how what you did in SoCal LiNK has influenced learning or leadership practices in your context?
Yes. So first, it was really a coming together. So, when you would just get really busy, with your schedules, with the idea of doing school. So it was really about how do we make this portrait of a learner come to life? What does this really mean in our system? And first, it was like we had time together in these, thank you, Dave, for kind of laying out that trajectory. So it was like coming together and talking about what we wanted to do. And then that second meeting, it was really beautiful to connect with other districts. What are other people thinking about? Where are we similar? Who else is thinking about these things? And then you can see, really that central question is how does this come alive for students? So how do we kind of take action in making this come to life? So we did a lot of taking street data and really collecting the voice of students, of parents, of teachers. So that for me, that looked like a lot of student focus groups. I would just meet with them regularly. I'd put 3 questions up and I'd say, what would you want your parents to know? What's not on the report card that you wish that your parents knew? Or, what do you care about as a learner? How would you communicate that? So they would just, come in, chat, write their ideas. So we really kind of got this sense that kids wanted their parents to be proud of them. They wanted to show that they were learning and that they were growing. And they cared a lot about that message that gets home. So here at Ocean Air, we have a very competitive system also. We want to have all of the top scores that you can possibly have. So in collaborating with other school districts, we know, like, I think at that second meeting, we talked to Encinitas because they had done some of this work, kind of got some context around, ooh, this is kind of the process that they went through. What are things that we need to consider? What are the questions we need to be asking ourselves and our parents? So after that meeting, we went back and we took some more street data. We talked to parents. We went, I talked to PTA, boards and just talking to people coming and going. And we really got that sense of what do parents expect in that reporting system? What's missing in that storytelling of learning? And then, like you said, it was messy till it was magic. talk about like that speed dating that you paired us at that last meeting, that collaboration with such beautiful partnerships. So we kind of got to talk to Blue Dot about, they just have a totally different mindset around outdoor learning and the experience of learning. And they could kind of nudge our thinking a little bit and sort of ask some questions and really understand, you know, what else is possible. We really got some insight and started thinking about, oh, if we're trying to communicate about whole learner outcomes, ooh, we might have some more digging to do. And then we partnered with Design 39, who was doing something very similar to us. They had been going through that similar process. And it was so wonderful to kind of listen to them. And they had shared, they were doing empathy interviews with their parents. And just how detailed, like what were the questions that they were asking? They really went deeper into that collection of that parent voice. So it was really beautiful to kind of have a moment at the end of that to say, wow, we committed to this like thinking and taking action. And then we just walked away with more questions and more to do, but we really did you had opportunities not only within our own context, but with that broader context to just um, really reconsider,
Mm,
what it is we want to see for our
love
learner.
that. Love that. And the benefit of multiple perspectives is something that is so important in these interactions. I want to turn it over to Dr. Cornejo-Sanchez from High Tech High. And High Tech High, of course, organization that has this great reputation for innovation and success. So what was it that drew you and the High Tech High team into this network?
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much for having me here, Devin. We were able to participate last year, and I think that it's in regards to alignment of values, right? As we think about learner-centered approaches, it very much aligns to our design principles of equity, personalization, authentic work, and collaborative design. And I think that this provided us with another opportunity to collaborate, not just internally with our folks, but on different levels with other educators and different systems too, right? As a charter school, we were able to learn from the County Office of Education. We were able to connect with folks at some, comprehensive school districts, as well as other charter schools and graduate schools. So this opportunity is just like a gift of time to be able to kind of center our work. And for our team, our goal was really thinking about our emergent multilingual learners and really wanting to ensure that they felt consistently supported and connected with our school, and that there's like greater participation within ELAC, but that we were also providing the support for our educators too. And so really having opportunities to look at some more traditional models that offer these services, but also think outside of the box in terms of like what does that support look like for our organization. As a student-centered organization, for us, it really helped elevate the question around are all students centered, right? Really thinking about the various subgroups that we serve. So it allowed us to really think about that. I think, what really drew our work was a lot of this like empathy, or drove us to this work was a lot of this empathy that feels like it's just a natural part of who we are. It's in our DNA. And so really thinking about belonging, trust, and relationships, which were the themes that we kicked off with last year, and how they transitioned into this year's work, specifically with this population, felt like a natural next step in regards to something that we have set out to work towards in our organization.
Love that. Love that. And yeah, those connections between belonging and relational trust flourishing for us as adults, and for all those that we interact with, including the families of all of our students, is really resonant. Can you maybe share an example of what's one thing you learned through this process that maybe was surprising or reinforcing of some of those practices, or the identity that you already had before jumping into this work?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things that we pride ourselves in, right, is this, Kristen, thank you for bringing up street data, is this opportunity to be able to look at different forms of data. And we really leaned heavily on our EML students, as well as our families who were participating in ELAC, and recognizing that like that structure is such a formal structure that it felt very intimidating for families to even participate in. So what were the other structures that we could put in place in order to help them feel a sense of belonging, in order to be able to advocate for themselves but also their students? One of the things that we did early on to launch this work at every single one of our schools, 16 of them, was have EML empathy interviews where some of our EML students went to staff meetings at their school site with their teachers and staff there and participated in empathy interviews. And that provided the opportunity for our educators to build connection, build a shared purpose for this work, but also just like build the humanity behind the supports for our EML community. It also just like highlighted the need to like stay attuned to what our families were facing, both within our control and outside of our control. So a lot of our work shifted towards well, we balanced it out with the new administration's policies in regards to immigration in our undocumented communities, and really wanting to educate and build the capacity of our community, because in order for us to support them, we needed them to be here. And there was just such a fear of coming to schools, being in Southern California, for fear of perhaps deportation, that we knew that we needed to provide extra supports for our families and our students, which included like board policies, which included trainings for our teachers, which included trainings for our students so that they understood their rights. So you can kind of see from the photos here ways that we have built the capacity of our educators through professional development. You'll see down at the bottom just our ELAC committee here. And then I would say also just like the celebration of the diversity. We're a diverse by design school. So how do we celebrate that? And what does that look like? And really thinking about language as an asset. And as a result of the work that we have been doing, our director of EML shared the other day that we have almost tripled the amount of students graduating with the California Seal of Biliteracy. We have over 44 languages spoken here at High Tech High. And the fact that our students are now being able to be recognized at graduation through this seal of competency in their home language is another celebration for them and their family.
Love that. Thank you for sharing that. And one more question for you, Dr. Cornejo-Sanchez. You were able to interact across a variety of different systems through this network. What's one thing you learned about the value and complexity of working across these school systems through SoCal LiNK?
Yeah, I think that it provided us an opportunity to see different models of what, not just instruction, but what does the ability to like build community within these different systems look like? How do they navigate some of these more formal systems in order to break down the barriers for families? The ability to like be able to do a lot of resource sharing was really helpful when it came down to like the part of our goal that was related to like the teacher development part, in helping us identify programs that we had been exploring some platforms, and expose us to others that we hadn't considered, right? But I think like one of the things too is that like, hey, change is slow, and we feel very privileged to have the opportunity to have a little bit more flexibility within our system, which we were able to see in order to like be able to like celebrate our own progress that we've been able to make, right? Because being in it, you're kind of like, it's not moving fast enough. And then you get an opportunity to step back and look at, wow, these are all of the various accomplishments that we've been able to do over the last, not even a year yet. So
Yeah, love that. That's great. And maybe Krista, to round out that principal perspective also, what did you take from the interactions with school leaders that are operating in different systems, different contexts? What's your reflection on that process?
Well, it was just such a gift to kind of get perspective on like what is possible. Like when we're rethinking a whole system change, like our philosophy, what do we think about assessment? Like what are we going to take action on? What is this like when we now tell the story of this child's learning, like what's possible? It was just a gift to hear um, what other people were considering or ideas that they had. Really sort of aspirational, like these big ideas. Like really, can we really do something big? Oh, is that too scary? Like it was just very it felt really good to kind of go out and think big, and then we'd reel it in, we'd say, okay, here's our next steps. But it just it felt very exciting to think about like the possibilities, that we weren't just going to be stuck in another version of what we currently have.
Mhm. Love that. Thank you. All right, so now we're going to open it up to kind of a whole group conversation, and maybe to start, I'll put Dr. Daly on the spot here. You've had the privilege to be involved in different sorts of research practice networks over the course of your career, and when you think about when these networks are most effective, what does successful collaboration look like across K-12, higher ed, community? What needs to be in place to make these networks impactful?
Yeah, mimosas, I would say. The element here. I don't think anyone on the call will argue with that. So let's establish that's the foundation. From there, I think Dinah and Krista are just so fabulous on so many different levels. I hope some of the folks joining here have an opportunity to reach out and connect with them. And I think they've captured what's been going on in SoCal LiNK really well. And what they've both pointed to, I think, Devin, which is one of the key elements, is this idea about vulnerability. When Krista talks about like people getting paired up to work together, there's a sense of vulnerability. You're sharing something about your practice, your system, and you're sharing both about the things that have gone well, but about the struggles that you're having. And to really move these relationships any further down the road, we've got to create the psychologically safe spaces to be able to be vulnerable with one another. Absent that, Devin, I don't think I've seen any system that's really successful. So once you've established this level of vulnerability, which of course implies various facets of trust that are in play, then I think it's about deep, authentic, and genuine relationships. I truly enjoy the folks that we work with and we get to learn from. And I think that's a critical component. And I would argue that we need more opportunities for joy in our life, even these slices of joy, right? Moments of joy that we have. And when we can feel safe with one another, when we can build on those trusting relationships, when we can be in community and joy with one another, that's when the real magic happens. We often put too much time and attention in titles and positions and all of the other things. At the end of the day, the future matters less about roles and positions and more about the relationships that we have, that we build, and that we nurture. And developing that muscle and re-engaging that muscle that for far too long has been not activated because we've all been under a lot of technical presses, I think is what's going to be necessary. And I would really, aside from mimosas, like being together, I think are the key things.
Yeah. Spending time together. Margaret Wheatley writes about how, the more time you spend with someone, the more likely you are to trust them and to be open and to be vulnerable. And so there is a certain level of commitment, I think, that it takes to create those kind of relationships. And I think the repeated interactions are certainly part of, what has been helpful here. I wonder for either Diana or Krista, has there been a moment in this, the arc of your experience where you felt like you really had real connection with someone either inside your, one of your team members or maybe across teams?
I would say there's been lots of moments. So I, I think that at the very beginning of this process, when we had some time, we were really coming up with our goal together. Um, it got all of it, it was multiple people, in a conversation that we hadn't had the opportunity to have. So that focused time together was, I mean, you you can do a lot in a short conversation. You can hear a lot of things from each other, even just our hopes, our aspirations. What can we do? Oh, we're going to do this. Like this is kind of going to be the pathway. And then also, I was really just like very almost emotionally grateful for the opportunity we had in talking to the people from Design 39. They just asked these questions that really we hadn't considered, like even doing what they had done. And it was like, oh, that's such an easy, beautiful, nugget that we could take and use right away. And it just, it didn't take that much to get that, but it was showing up, it was listening, and it was that vulnerability and the willingness to share.
Love that. Thank you for sharing. Diana, was there a moment that came to mind for you?
I mean, there's two that are like really sticking out to me. One was in one of our color dotting experiences that we had in relationship to data collection, to kind of track our progress. I think Dave came over at some point and looked at our chart and we had identified like the various stakeholders that were going to be involved in that data collection. And we were talking about bright spotting, which is a practice that we have of going into classrooms in order to identify key practices that we want to like spread. And we were going to do that in order to look for, supports to support our EML students. And Dave came over and said, just wondering, like, why aren't students in that stakeholder group there? We looked at each other and we said, yeah, you're right. Why aren't they? Like our kids are very well aware of what good teaching looks like, feels like, and sounds like. So absolutely bring them into that. And then I think just like in my current role, right, which is like an identity shift for me, because I forever think of myself as a teacher, is being able to work with our teachers during that time and our director in order to say, these are the needs that our community has. What can we go out and do right now in order to attend to this need? And so that went from anything from, doing a welcome message at an ELAC committee meeting or writing a special invitation note to a parent, to attend ELAC, a handwritten note. So just little things like that I think allowed our educators, right, to like see this like partnership and collaboration, even internally, that like, no, this is a like roll everybody, all hands on deck, right? Like we're here to serve our kids.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, both of your stories kind of remind me that our factory model of teaching and learning was not set up for professional collaboration or cross-sector collaboration. We have this legacy of self-contained classrooms where teachers very seldom get out to even see what's happening down the hall, or building principals often don't know what's happening in a school down the street or across town. And system leaders also, very infrequently have a chance to get out of their own environment and go see what's happening in other places. And it's often that outside perspective that asks the simple questions like the one you shared, Diana, that like it's so insightful, even though it seems so obvious once you hear it, but it's still insightful, and it helps you reflect on your own practices and your own identity. And then sometimes, you're exposed to things that are just so foreign to your own experience that it compels you to re-examine why you do a way, and how else you could consider approaching a particular challenge. So I think the novelty of those different perspectives is just so helpful for those of us that are in education. And I wonder for our higher education partners, Alan and Dave, when you think about this network and it's evolved so far. How do you imagine it might continue to evolve and grow over time? And what do you see in the future for a network like this?
I'll maybe start by saying I think one of the beautiful things about the sort of the regional network is that, you know, some of these schools, communities, organizations are down the street from each other. And I think when we think about the future, it's like, how do we create more entry points for more organizations that are working in our local community that are wrestling with the same problems of practice or doing the same kinds of work? Right? Like, how do we make those de-silo a lot of that work? Because we know that whether you're a principal or a superintendent, the work can be lonely and you are so overwhelmed with the day-to-day that sometimes it's really hard to step back. And I think something that Krista and Diana both highlighted really nicely is the importance of taking that time and space. As you mentioned, Devin, there's this like gap. We've got this factory model, and then we've got this aspiration for learner-centered education. And when we step back and we think about like to what extent are our practices aligned with the values and beliefs that we espouse, whether we're a traditionally successful organization or a traditionally progressive organization, right? Like, is our work aligning with what we believe? And I think most educators, most people in our community would find that there are spaces, opportunities for improvement. And the future, I think, holds time spaces where we can really bravely sit with that. And like Krista and Diana both said, like bravely invite other voices into that, right? Like this isn't just about collaborating across organizations. This is about collaborating with the stakeholders who matter to us, right? Our teachers, our classified staff, our families, our students, right? Like that every layer of the system has value and contributes in really unique and beautiful ways. And only when we are brave enough to like look at that and open ourselves up to that, and when then we invite and share others with that, like we can become something really magnificent. Alan?
I mean, that was beautifully said, Dave. I think that one of the most important things, I think, is that it's going to indicate the importance of the shifting role in higher education. No longer are we isolated from the community and hiding behind our rigor. We've got to be connected to relevance. So it's both the rigor and the relevance. And Dave, that was genuinely and beautifully said. I think that captures really nice the spirit of what we're trying to build here.
Wonderful. So we've received some good questions from our attendees. One of them was asking us if we could just share a few more examples of goals that other teams had through this process. And so either Dave or Alan, if there are a few that come to mind, what were some of the other goals that were established by the school systems involved in this network?
Yeah, so there were some goals. One was around creating a culture of belonging and trust among scholars and staff. So it was really targeted on how do we enhance sense of belonging amongst everybody. We had one organization focusing on sense of belonging among emerging multilingual learners, right? Like targeting a particular community. We had folks who were focused on aligning their learning progressions with their reporting systems. That was Del Mar, right? So some real concrete elements there. We also had some organizations that were looking to see a real concrete measurable increase in particular teaching practices. We had other folks that were really thinking about, similar to Del Mar, is right, like create a system that reflects the learning that students are doing, not just academically, but in terms of their skills, their dispositions. We had other folks that were really intentionally working to design a system of coherence across their organization because they recognized that they had all of these disparate learner-centered efforts and that there was a greater potential to coordinate those.
Wonderful. We get another deep question from one of our attendees, and this could go to either Krista or Diana, but the question is saying, you know, if you're in a system where the perception is that you're successful based on whatever that looks like in your environment, how does that make the change process challenging?
That is definitely a question, a big part of the context. You know, that was something we were considering the whole way through this and still are considering because, you know, we had a big conversation about how what we see in the classrooms, we get to live it every day. We're in classrooms with kids. We see the teaching and learning, the experience that a student has now. and that's can be like a very separate place from parents, from, you know, what they experienced as a learner. Because you just kind of have your experience and you make an assumption that when I was in school, we had timed math tests and we had, you know, the report card mattered. So we had like a lot of just concerns around change and how do we tell the story and why is that necessary. So we've talked about ways that we communicate the story of learning through, you know, whatever our principals are communicating to families, whether that comes from our district kind of communication, because and that street data that collect, you know, that those parent questions were really like, do you see a gap here? Is there something that we need to consider? And there were a lot of parents that were like, yeah, it's great. I don't, you know, a lot of our parents really care about the report card, and they really care about sort of how we're comparing my child to your child. You know, that is just how the system works right now. So we were really talking about sort of how could that system be more reflection, and it's about learning and growth and progress versus this comparison sort of outcome. So definitely something that we've been thinking about. I don't know that we have all the answers, but it's
Mhm.
a huge part of our context, and it's something that we need to navigate and be really mindful of.
Yeah. Anything you'd want to add, Diana?
I mean, we have all worked in schools and in classrooms, and we know how honest kids are. And
Mhm.
when you center the student experience and their voice, then no matter how successful you are, you're going to find ways to grow, and ways to like make your experience more inclusive for students. So that I think is definitely something to continuously go back to, but also thinking about how we look at data and what kind of data we're looking at, right? And looking at it from multiple vantage points, like seeing it from different subgroups, seeing it from different lenses and user experiences. So I would say that those are just really quickly some identifiable ways to see if you're really, you know, where you can improve.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think, yeah, staying grounded and centered in the learner experience is always humbling and inspiring as well.
That's right.
So last question for the panelists, and I'm going to ask us to kind of zip around and answer this quickly, and then I'll move to wrapping us up. But if you had advice that you wanted to give to a leader who was in a different community and they wanted to start some sort of cross-sector collaboration like this research practice partnership that is a networked approach and ecosystem model that we have here with SoCal LiNK, what would be your quick advice about, you know, a first step that they should be taking to bring this sort of network to life?
I'm going to say diversity of the stakeholders that are involved, right? Like you all intentionally had like teachers, directors, central leadership. Like you had kind of like a formula.
Mhm.
I would throw in there thinking about how these folks could have helped informed our practice is bringing in a student, bringing in a parent as well.
Yeah, diversity by design, as you talked about your own principles, is a good starting point. Love that. What else?
I'd say if you really, you know, because there can be a lot of pressure to build something huge, but I would encourage people to think about two core network ideas: bridging and bonding. Let's start with bonding first. So bonding, find folks that you have some existing relationships already and start there. Let that be your foundation, right? That's the bonding idea. Bond together these kinds of relationships that you have. And then start considering to bridge out, which is what we did. We started by bonding sets of relationships that we had, and then we're bridging out to others. So don't try
Mhm.
to do it all at once. Start small, bond, then bridge, and then continue to bond and bridge.
Yeah, great. That allows for kind of emergent design to occur.
And I think something that facilitates that, a lot of times as educators representing organizations, we're in spaces where it's hard to talk vulnerably about the challenges we're wrestling with. And yet it is when we are transparent about like, gosh, we really like we're working towards this and we're not quite there yet. When we share out the things that we're wrestling with, when we do it honestly and vulnerably and do it not for any other reason other than to like build community with others. Like that trust, I think, is really important, and we can better bond and bridge and network when we know what other folks are dealing with.
Thank you.
I would just add something quite simple, which is, everybody has this sort of their own ability to control that next step. So whether that's just making a commitment to connect with somebody else, it could be within your own, school context, a colleague that you used to work with, just even if, put something on the calendar literally to make a connection, because that's the best next step. It's opening yourself up, and it's something that all of us can do.
Wow. Well, thank you to all of our panelists for your incredible insights, your wisdom, your experience, and just for sharing, your insights through this collaborative network, this emergent SoCal LiNK project. We're co-designing and co-creating new and different ways of being with one another, so that we can bring that to life for more and more of our learners. And I just appreciate each of you for your authenticity in the process. And so much of this conversation is bringing me back to some of the research that I did when I was doing my dissertation around relational trust. And in that research, what I found was there were 4 things that really have to be present to have relational trust. You need consistency, compassion, competence, and communication. And through this conversation, I've heard examples of the importance of continuing to show up, and the reliability and the sort of predictability of the rhythms of interaction, which is really foundational. And we've heard stories of actually caring about one another and opening up and contributing to one another by sharing ideas and resources, and really listening to one another in a thoughtful way. And that's all part of being compassionate. And through this, each of the teams has had a goal, and they've been trying to work towards that goal. They've been trying to achieve something meaningful, which is a form of competence. And then communication is two-way. Your receptive communication is so important, and also expressive. And you've heard lots of great examples of people listening to one another and also contributing and sharing. And so I'm hopeful that through SoCal LiNK, we are building relational trust. And as we do so, hopefully moving in the direction of these ecosystems where we're learning together. And in that process, getting a better sense of who we are as individuals, knowing ourselves, thriving in community with one another, and then actively engaging in the world as our best selves. So taking all of these lessons learned and making the world a better place. And so we appreciate the opportunity to connect and share as panelists, and with each of you as attendees. We are going to be asking for your feedback, and we'd love to have your responses in the chat in terms of what resonated about what you heard today. And also, if you see an opportunity or you have a suggestion, we would love to hear that. And as you're going through that reflection, I will also just let you know that we at Learner Centered Collaborative are, as I said, nonprofit. We like to share. And so on our website, learnercenter.org, you will find lots and lots of resources, including at some point a recording of this webinar. And we encourage you to dive into those resources and use them to help bring about these new possibilities for learners. And we would love your feedback. And so we're going to ask you to do a survey, and we would love to stay connected with each of you. And so after the survey, you'll see our website link. We're also active on social media. You can send us email messages, and we just look forward to staying connected with each of you so that we can continue to co-design, co-create this learning ecosystem that's good for each of us individually and collectively. So thank you all for being here, and we look forward to what's possible together. Thank you again to our panelists also.